Radio Retro Future. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Radio Retro Future, the Anachronistic Society, where today we'll discuss the paranormal in fiction, which is a very broad subject, we know, but we'll see where the conversation leads us. And today we have with us Demas Poe and Bartholomeus from the Netherlands. Demas Poe was the one who came up with the idea of having a discussion on the paranormal. And yes, let's just go to you and tell us why you wanted to have this conversation, Demas.
Mainly it's kind of a ego thing. I can't help but, I'm very passionate about the paranormal, and I like talking about it if at all possible. And I know that currently, with the rise of horror movie culture and TV shows and video games and all that, as well as books and comic books, the paranormal has and probably will be a very prominent feature in popular fiction for many, many years to come. And I feel like there are some discrepancies between reality and fiction, which obviously that's going to naturally be a thing, but there also is some truth behind some of the stuff in fiction, and there's also fiction behind some of the stuff in reality, with TV shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and several other TV shows like that, that I feel that a podcast and talking it out with like-minded individuals would be able to and help kind of clear up some of those discrepancies. I have been a researcher of the paranormal for about 10 or so years now, and I've been an active investigator for about 7 years or so. And my passion for it has been extremely great, and it still is, but I do get disheartened when every time I turn on a TV, I see another TV show pop up that doesn't necessarily tell you the right information. And I feel like if you don't know the right information, that leads to misunderstandings, and that promotes fear. And I feel like we need to stop that. We need to promote understanding so that people can understand the paranormal a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Bart. Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Bart. You're the more of a kind of spiritual guy. You've been acting in a lot of, the more spiritual circles, so to say. What is your opinion on such paranormal rituals in fiction, primarily TV?
From a fictional standpoint, it always seems to me be a little bit more as a joke, because the difference between real paranormal is that you actually feel the fear of something that is around, while in the shows you see almost like, I think the best one to describe it with is an episode of South Park where you see a few ghost guys from like there is a ghost, and they soon start pissing their pants just to get a few TV ratings. Because to understand actual paranormal activities, like Poe said, it's really, you want to give it get a better understanding of what's going on, because from a deep down level, there is something going on, which is very interesting to see and actually to feel, but we cannot grasp it with our senses. So when I see indeed a TV show, like we're gonna hunt some ghosts, and they're just movie shaky cameras and God knows everything what, I start to wonder how you get your ratings. Why is this interesting? Because, one of the actual things that most of our circles experience, like ghosts and other paranormal activities, they are very scared and try to ease the place they are, because the places they often go become shrines or rituals. Like one of the most strangest feelings is still Normandy Beach. When people go there, they go there in silence because they know what happened there and they can feel all the uneasy rest. That is a way better impact, and we respect that place more if we know what happened there.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of. I'm not that particularly active with paranormal things, but I've been a big fan of that show. Oh, what was it called? Ghost Hunters? With those plumbers?
Yes.
What was it called again?
It's called Ghost Hunters. That's just that's their name. They're technically called TAPS, or the Atlantic Paranormal Society.
Oh yeah.
But Sci-Fi just made the TV show Ghost Hunters to kind of make it easier to digest. Because TAPS is kind of a mouthful if you spell it out to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what's their standing right now with your fellow ghost hunters? Because I think...
Go ahead, finish what you were saying.
Yeah, I think I watched about like the first 3 seasons of that show, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was very interesting. Not that I believed everything that they said that they experienced was true, but I think it was about the 3rd season when the whole thing started to feel really staged. And I started to lose interest. But they did seem to have uncovered some interesting finds, some interesting events, which they recorded. So how seriously are they taken these days?
Well, it all depends on the individual and or the team of paranormal investigators that you meet. A lot of them share the opinion that they're practically gods and that they can do no wrong, and that anyone who says differently is not a true paranormal investigator and needs to be shunned. There are some, like myself, that have heard stories through the grapevine, through talking to people who've been associates, and then have mysteriously fallen out of favor, air quotes, with the group that suggests that for a myriad of different reasons, they are no longer in complete control of the content they produce.
Right.
Because, unfortunately, fear sells. The scarier you make a TV show, the more it'll entice people to come and watch. So, what's actually scarier? Hearing a knock, but the camera doesn't pick anything up, or actually seeing something, but not being completely, but being underwhelmed by it. You know what I mean?
Yes. May I ask something? For like people like me who haven't seen the show, could you explain a little bit more about the show? Tell them what it's all about.
Good question.
Basically, in the early 2000s, 2 gentlemen by the name of Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson, they basically have the typical story, comic book story origin. They're plumbers by day, but ghost hunters by night. And they got their start by going to people's houses and helping them understand what was going on in their house. And I know because Bonesard said that he just watched the first couple of seasons, that in the beginning, they do seem to genuinely be helping people understand what's going on. But by around season 3, that's when the money keeps coming in for them from Sci-Fi, and Sci-Fi's like, hey, you guys need to start doing this. And that's when the production quality goes up, but the actual quality of the information that you're getting goes down. Basically, they go into buildings and houses and all that, and they look for evidence of paranormal activity. Whether they find it or not is completely irrelevant depending on the place. It's mainly their goal is to, and I'm using air quotes again, help people figure out if they're actually being haunted or not. Like, a very famous episode is they went to a very large ship. I believe it's called the Queen Mary. I'm not positive. I could be messing that up. And that's reportedly extremely haunted.
Eric.
And they basically found that almost everything could be explained away by natural phenomenon such as old pipes creaking, water from outside. Metal conducts sound very easily, so voices were actually just echoes that were reverberating off the walls, and by the time it reaches your ears, it sounds like a whisper. It was a myriad of other things. But I live in Virginia in the United States, and a bunch of places that TAPS have gone to exist in my state. And I was privy to a conversation from someone who worked at one location, but actually lived at another location, and both locations were visited by TAPS on 2 separate episodes. And the production crew, not the team itself, but the production crew, was actually found to be deliberately creating evidence by tying a bit of fishing line to a sheet and slowly pulling it off the bed because they forgot to remove the fishing line when they left. The owner of the house found it still attached to her sheet.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, Eric, you're here now.
for whatever reason, I think my laptop is haunted because it knew that I was going to be on a podcast. Of course, so it decided to just stop working altogether. I have a very unique perspective on all of this because obviously one of the podcasts that I do is the Metaphysical Connection, and I've gone on, I don't want to call it ghost hunting, but so I've gone on several ghost hunting excursions here in the New England area, specifically around New Hampshire, and we have a very sort of scientific approach to it, whereas we're not out to prove anything. When I go out with this specific group here in the Monadnock region, it's the total understanding is that you put all evidence on the table and you say, this is what we've discovered. We've set up microphones, especially with me and my advanced setup here with my high-end microphones and my mixing board and whatever. And we just record. We interview the people and we say, okay, where's the room where the most activity happens? We do an investigation as far as like, well, what's in that room? One room in particular was an ancient Ouija board. It wasn't those Parker Brothers cardboard knockoffs. This was like a legitimate Ouija board before everybody knew what a Ouija board was.
It was
And
pre-Hasbro, that sort of thing.
Thing is that it was like there was all these other sort of like weird, scary artifacts that this person had collected. Myself, this is not cool. But one of the things that it's like you see in a lot of these shows, especially like Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel and the TAPS team, is that it's all about the ratings. It has nothing to do with whether or not there are ghosts there or not. It has everything to do with the ratings. And how are you going to suck the people in to watch the show? And it's like you don't want a Ghostbusters show, as it were, and not have any ghosts. Sort of defeats the purpose of there being ratings. What they should be focused more on is, well, what happened in that specific location? Why could this place be haunted? Here's the evidence, and don't use your special effects. Don't use your fishing line and whatever, because the thing is that what they've done, what TAPS has done since season 4, I guess, is that they've done a great job undermining the rest of us who are actually going out there and trying to prove that these places could be haunted. I'm not saying they are haunted. I mean, I believe that some of the pictures that one of my friends has taken completely, totally freaked me out. Some of the things that I have heard freaked me out. I had a camera pointing in one direction when we were doing an investigation in a graveyard. We had it pointed in one direction. It was my camera, and I cinched everything down. I turned my back for 3 minutes and went back. It was pointing in the other direction. And I had asked, hey, did anybody touch my camera? Dude, I wouldn't touch your camera. Why would anybody well, somebody picked up my camera and turned it 45, 90 degrees. Those kind of things happen a lot on these investigations. And the thing is that it's like, you don't have to fake it. If it's real, but what they have done is undermine all of us who are really trying to do the real work. So
Exactly.
For a consumer basis, it's unescapable. At the moment you actually get a TV show, you have a simple time schedule and you need to make money out of it. So it really undermines your work.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that is the case. But let's go back for a bit. What inspired you, especially Demos and Eric, to go on ghost hunting to begin with?
Eric, do you want to go first, or?
I was actually going to let you go first.
Okay.
So kind.
Such gentlemen, yes.
I will tell you first and foremost. My father was really into. By the way, this is the first. This feels really weird. This is the first podcast I've done since he's died. So who knows? Maybe we'll have some weird ghost effects on this show. My dad was really into the paranormal after he came back from the military back in the late 50s, early 60s. For reasons he never talked about. He never actually gave an actual explanation of why is it that he was all into cowboys and Indians when he left to go into the military, and he came back and he was all into ghosts and UFOs when he came back from the military. He never gave me full disclosure. And the thing is, like, he had all these books about all these hauntings and things like that, and he was wondering, what would happen if I just go and just take photographs of these strange places? What if I just took a tape recorder that you get at Radio Shack or at Kmart, and I just left it there, and like, would there be? Because there's this thing called electric voice phenomenon, EVP, and that he had read about a little bit. And this is like back in the late 70s, early 80s, when things were like sort of sketchy, where a lot of people weren't talking about this. This wasn't in the mainstream yet. There's a lot of really sort of underground publications about all of these things. And I'm not saying that my father was a forerunner, but he was one of those people who was just sort of like following the leaders in all of this. And he took me on one of these adventures, in Halloween night, 1987, and we had just taken some photographs with this really cheap 110 millimeter camera, and we bought this brand new audio cassette in a tape recorder, and we were just like listening to, and we played it through the stereo, and we heard some weird things that we couldn't understand back in the day, and we had no audio equipment to analyze any of it. But it was just like, the little weird shadows and the little wisps of fog or whatever that kind of like looked like human beings. I was hooked, when I saw those after we got the film developed. What a lot of people don't seem to realize is that it's a lot easier now than it used to be. Because the thing is, everybody has this instant gratification with digital media.
Oh, yeah.
You can take a photograph, you can see it like a microsecond later. You have to take your film, get it developed, and you actually had to have a relationship with the person who was developing your film. These were all taken at night, see what you can do. And of course, your film developer would be playing with the exposures and said, hey guys, I think I've seen this. And the thing is that the guy who was developing our film was actually like sort of like a partner with us. And I miss that aspect of it. But for me, it wasn't so much trying to figure out if there are ghosts or not. I was trying to figure out my relationship with my dad, and why did my dad go off the deep end with this? So,
all right.
I found it very interesting. You said a few points I can give some. Mostly that first, in that you have your time for your brain to let it calculate, like, what did I just see? To actually think about it and then watch at the and now you can look immediately back at the camera from like, oh, I saw that, which probably loses some of the charm. But what I most found funny is that you said during Halloween, which is actually one of the most biggest points in our time when ghosts do appear. Do you know where it come from?
I think that a lot of people seem to have their own theories in when ghosts appear. There's the whole notion of the 3 o'clock hour, like obviously there's dusk, the hours just before the sun comes up and the hours just after the sun goes down. Obviously there's like there are bewitching hours, as it were, and everybody sort of seems to believe that within their region, some people seem to think that midnight is obviously the time when all the ghosts.
But actually, one of the biggest points indeed in history is when we go back to ancient folklore is Halloween, when we actually call it Samhain back then, is when the ghosts of time really came through the fog from the undead to, it's when the end of harvest, when everything is about to die and the last of the harvest is being pulled in. And at that time, when that is at the most biggest point, the ghosts do come from the veil to reach over, sometimes for messages, sometimes for just to tease people. So it is really a big time in ancient time that they knew we have to be careful. We have to pray our houses protected from the ghost without who came from the underworld. There are a lot of folklores in that, which is actually lost.
Goes back to the whole original myths on the werewolves. But before we go to stray off too far, Dimos, what's your modus? How do you say? What's your reason for ghost hunting?
Well, I really wasn't too involved with it until I moved to Virginia, and when I was in middle school, particularly 8th grade, I was waiting outside for my bus one December, and we used to have by our carport this very large pine tree. And this was before we had put up a fence in our around our backyard and all that. So it was kind of rather large, and there was a lot of stuff in the way. Well, I remember I was halfway on my driveway, so about halfway to the street, halfway to my house, and I saw out of the corner of my eye a flash of dark blue dart behind the tree. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And I go and I look behind the tree and I see nothing. Well, then later that day, once I get to school, I'm in history class, and we open up the history book and we start learning about the Civil War. And I noticed something, that one of the uniforms that I'm looking at on the pages looks eerily similar to what I saw quickly dart behind the tree in my front yard. And it then hit me that I may have seen a Union soldier. And I didn't think anything of it really at the time, but it did kind of spark an interest in me. And it was around that time that Ghost Hunters was becoming more and more popular on sci-fi. And like, you know what? What harm can come from this? I'm gonna watch a couple episodes. Well, I watched a couple episodes and I became hooked. And I'm like, I want to find out more about this. So I started off with my school library, and I'm very well aware just how cliche this sounds, but I swear to you, this is exactly how my library was. There was a portion of my school's library that had all the books on the occult and the paranormal and stuff like that, that I swear to you, the light always flickered. And no matter what anyone did, it would continue flickering. They changed the light bulb, they had an electrician come in, whole 9 yards. Nothing they did would prevent that damn light from flickering. And so it already added to the creepiness of it, given the fact that this particular section of the library was in the very back. There wasn't a whole lot of sunlight that reached it. So you damn near needed to get a lot of light to see any of the book titles, because of that fact that it was so dark and kind of oppressive. But I remember devouring as much of that section as I could. It didn't matter if it dealt with ghosts. It didn't matter if it dealt with cryptozoology, mythological beings. It didn't matter if it dealt with folklore or the different pantheons. It didn't matter if it dealt with paganism versus monotheistic religions. Anything that I could get my hands on that would help me decipher what I'm seeing or what I was experiencing and learning about, I attached to. And that led to me devouring over 2/3 of my school's library and going, hey, I want more, and having to go to my local library, which thankfully is very close to my house. And that led to me accruing very quickly a lot of library fines, because I would check out like 25 books at a time and read all 25 books, but not in a timely manner that the librarians approved of.
I did, where you work full your own boss. There are
once I graduated high school, I kind of put it off my radar. I really wasn't able to watch Ghost Hunters as often because it came on so late, and I share a room with my brother, so I kind of have to, go to bed when he goes to bed. Otherwise, I would have gotten in trouble. But it was shortly after my first semester of college. I did not do very well. I was in a very bad funk, and I'm like, I need something to occupy my mind and get me off of the bad things that have happened. So I looked online, just for shits and giggles, for paranormal groups in my area. And there was about 6, and I sent out emails, and I got 2 responses back. The first group that I talked to, he wanted to meet at the downtown library, so I went and I met him. And this was a very serious individual, very dour, very not like, I'm a very funny guy. When you meet me in person, I will crack jokes to kind of alleviate the tension of meeting a new person. Like, that's just my thing. And like, nothing I said would make this guy smile. And so I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? These are the funny jokes. Come on, laugh. And I found out that the reason why he didn't laugh is because he takes this stuff very seriously, because he was a priest and viewed all paranormal activity as varying degrees of demonic activity. And at that time, and I still kind of am, I was struggling to find myself spiritually, and a requirement to join this group was within 6 months of being accepted, I had to become a priest.
Sorry about what?
Yes.
Seriously? Like a
Yes.
like a Catholic priest?
Like as an ordained priest.
Why did you have to become a priest? What's the reason behind it? Was it
Because everything was like, they wanted a solid foundation of faith, so that way whenever they go in and deal with the demon, no one would falter and no one would get injured.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which I can understand that, but that's a little extreme.
Never underestimate a demon.
I mean, I came up with a little bit of a white lie and excused myself, and I decided to meet with the other team that responded back to me. And I absolutely hate telling people the name of this group because of the internet connotations that the acronym is associated with. And I talked to this guy. He was a former service member. He served in the Army, was a military policeman, left the Army due to an injury, but it wasn't like a super bad injury, so he stayed as a policeman. Then got another injury on the job, so he retired from that and got into paranormal investigating. And I joined his team and went on a few. Actually, it's quite interesting. The first time that I met with him to do a test investigation, I was in his van at a local battlefield. The car was still on. For like 2 seconds, he got a major blip on a piece of equipment he had, and the entire car shut off. The keys were still turned in the ignition, but the entire car was off.
Wow.
Now, obviously, seeing as I'm just starting out in this, the best part of this whole thing, and probably didn't help my nerves of that particular event, was the fact that the source of the major blip on this for the area that was creating this major blip on his equipment was in the seat next to me. Not exactly good for a first impression. Kind of gave me the Scooby-Doo syndrome of wanting to create a hole my shape in the car door. But anyway, the name of the group was the Fredericksburg Area Paranormal Investigation, which, yes, if you take the acronym, I am very well aware of how it can be pronounced. FAPI. Yeah, I got way too many jokes about that whenever I got my team shirt. It was horrendous. Anyway, I was with that team for quite a few years, and then through several altercations, I left the team because I felt like I wasn't being appreciated as much. I was still considered the kid or the young buck, as they like to call me, and I don't like it when people ignore my expertise or my skill level because of my age.
Understandable.
Yeah, totally understand.
It kind of grates on my nerves more than a little bit. But after I left that team, I joined another local team for a little bit while kind of balancing some online work. I don't know if you've heard of them, Eric. You might have. Have you ever heard of an organization called the National Paranormal Society?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the groups that I worked with here in the Monadnock region in New Hampshire, it tried to become affiliated with them. I'm very familiar.
I actually was one of their committee members and a department chair. I was the department chair for ufology, and I can tell you this right now. I am so sick and tired of hearing some bumpkin from Alabama telling me about how he saw his Uncle Jed get picked up by E.T. And now every time he opens up a Mountain Dew can, he sees Jesus float out of it.
Wow.
I wish I was kidding.
Some people do take it to the next extreme because they want to be
I do. One of the things that I would like to just interject here, two things I want to interject here, is that I think that there's an essential book that I think everybody should read. It's called Beware the Night. I talked about this in a previous podcast, at A Physical Connection, by Ralph Sarchi and Lisa Collier-Cool. And it is about a police officer who is a paranormal investigator who works with the priests. Now, and I have to interject this right away. Demonic love going after priests. Priests are their favorite targets. So if you're going to insist that everybody on your team is a priest, you're making everybody an extra juicy, tempting target for any
Might as well ring the dinner bell for the buffet.
Something else I want to interject is you now say that priests are nice, juicy targets. The first thing we learn in spirituality when we enter a particular area that is full of history, blood, and paranormal activity is to ease our energy and let us know we are in no way here to harm us. That's often what we do. We actually learn to avoid those places a lot, or just let go of our energy to know we are not a threat.
But there's also the idea that one goes with the other. I'm not really sure whether or not there are people who do have some sort of mental issues. Now, do they have the mental issues because of their encounters with the paranormal, or do they have these encounters with the paranormal because of their mental issues? And you have to sort of take that very seriously when dealing with a lot of these people, because you always get the best stories out of not the best stories. You get the most trustworthy stories from people who are very grounded. Whenever you hear somebody say something like, I wish this wasn't true, but, or you're going to think I'm crazy, but, those are usually the people that I prefer to deal with, because these people are they're not emotionally or mentally invested into it. When you have these people who like tell you all of these great things, I saw fairies dancing in my backyard and it was beautiful. That's when I sort of think, oh, this person's a crackpot. Go ahead.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that. I'm sorry. Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I was going to ask Bart, is this something that goes around in your circles, like stories of ghosts and other encounters?
A lot, actually, and we often can fish it out when they're faking it or when they're actually talking about it. Let's talk about one of the most funniest fake stories there was. That was also about the light, because you see, when some of our people are actually seeing ghosts, they are actually drawing from it. You know, they are making themselves too insecure, so they draw from it. But sometimes they're just out of whack. Like someone's like, my light is flickering. What should I do? And there were like 29 posts, and please replace your light because it's probably broken. But there are also actually, one of the biggest points is about fairies. Yes, there are fairies, but they come in more shapes, not the kind we're probably used to from TV. When I was in England a couple of months ago, in the Tower of Avalon, there is next to it a fairy forest, and you are just drawn to it. They're nice fairies, and they mean you no harm, but they do draw you in the forest and get you lost for a couple of minutes, because you're just so in that mood. And, you know, most people who haven't got used to all their senses, they find it hard to appreciate the place, feel the place. Because fairies in spirituality often toy with you because they love it. They just love to toy with you. So there's literally, next to the Tower of Avalon, there's a forest which is literally called the Fairy Forest.
All right.
And it's a beautiful place. It's the trees who are all crooked and ways. It has a mystical feeling to it. And the funny thing is, most people actually leave some things behind for the fairies or build little temples. So it only gets more magical and magical the more you see of the forest.
So it's a forest with all these miniature palaces and such?
Sometimes, yes, and maybe the fairies toyed them. Some can say, oh, the fairies toyed you into making a little place for them, but it's more of how a person feels about the fairies, because like I said, they're more like toying with you.
Yeah. Eric or Demas, have you ever visited such places?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. Demas, did you want to go first, or?
That's very difficult to say, because while I personally have not visited any place that has been very touched by the Fae, which is another name for fairy, I have been to places that have been touched by, I'm going to call them nature spirits. But the thing is these nature spirits, through one way or another, I'm not entirely certain, have become extremely corrupted and very malicious. One story in particular is one of my first investigations, actually, with the first group that I was with. We went over to a private residence, and this lady, her older brother, actually lived in the basement. And this guy was not nice. He was involved in a lot of MMA fighting, very mean, did not hunt for the sake of using its meat for sustenance. He did it for sport, oftentimes literally just taking the trophies and walking away. He was not a very nice person. But during one fight, he took one too many hits to the head, and a concussion led to early onset Alzheimer's. And so he was kind of becoming nicer, but not enough to really be easily visible. My team leader actually made it a thing where he was not allowed to be in the same room as one of our female members. So every time he was in the room, one of my team members, Jeannie, I had to be in the room with her if he was in the room as well. because I'm a fairly big guy. I'm 6'3" and over 300 pounds. Unless you absolutely positively aren't intimidated by that, most people tend to shy away.
Right.
But they were upstairs, my team leader and my other team member, investigating one of the rooms where they heard voices coming from, and they saw shadows flickering in an otherwise dark room on the cameras. And I was downstairs watching the cameras, and you know how houses have this little island bar thing before you get into the kitchen?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I was sitting at the island watching the cameras, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something on the stairs leading down to the basement. About 5 steps down, I see this shadowy figure that's darker than the area surrounding it. Because by this time, my night vision has full on kicked in, and I can see pretty much very good details of everything around me. Well, crouched on the stairs leading down to the basement was this figure, and like he was in a golem-like crouch. That's how crouched this thing was. And I really couldn't see much of its face except for 2 things. I could see its teeth, which were bright white and needle sharp, almost like an anglerfish or something, and I could see its eyes. They were glowing, but they were a dark green color. And you know those times where like you can stare at someone and it takes them a while before they notice that you're staring?
Yes.
Well, I was looking at this thing, and then almost as if it noticed that I finally was looking at it, it was getting ready to lunge at me. Like it was making the motions of putting its hands on the stairs, moved one of its legs up to the next step, and was getting ready to lunge at me. And at this point, my heart is racing. Like, there's metal bands that wish they had a heart, like they could play the drums like my heart was going. And I couldn't, my chest felt constricted, like I was terrified. And the reason for that is because I could feel the emotions coming off of this thing. And it didn't feel demonic, it felt natural. But it had an amount of hate for my being that I have never felt since. Like, if it could have, it would have obliterated every single one of the subatomic particles that made me me. And as it was getting ready to lunge, my team leader upstairs said, "Hey, are you making a noise?" And to this day, I don't know how, but I was able to say no. And when I said that, it didn't just fade away, it disappeared. Like, you know how when you blink and something's gone? I didn't blink and it disappeared. And it reappeared outside the house and walked by a window. Now, the reason why that itself is terrifying is because the window in question that it walked by, there was a good 3 feet between the bottom of the window to the ground. And the head of this thing touched nearly the top of the window.
Okay.
So that means it had to be close to 7 feet tall and had a very long nose. And it just, to this day, it was one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had. And I was asked twice by my team leader to go back to that house with him for a secondary visit, and I said no both times because, and I'll explain why in a second. That house just made me feel very uncomfortable. Like, imagine if you went into a college lecture hall and it was jam-packed full of people, and every single one of those people was glaring at you. Would you want to go back there?
Well, you see, the thing is, I'm a narcissist, so yeah. The thing that you're describing right here echoes many of the experiences that I have had in my experiences in going to locations that are, whether you want to call them haunted, you want to call them cursed or occupied by the paranormal. This is something that a lot of people have witnessed and experienced, but science has a really hard time explaining it. If you go to a strange place, a perfect example is that one of my other hobbies is searching for abandoned locations in New England, especially around the region where I live. And you go and you look at old maps of the region, you will find that it's like there are parts of New England that have been built up, then abandoned whenever the resource dried up or whatever. You find camping towns all over the place if you know how to look. And you go to these places and you can just, for whatever reason, you can feel a bad vibe or a good vibe. Like you can tell that when you go to an old basement of a house that used to exist there, you can tell what kind of family lived there. Whether it was a happy family or there was a raving alcoholic who was like very violent, you can tell people leave little psychic vibrations everywhere you leave. You leave essences of your emotional state wherever you go, whether you want to or not. It just happens. And science has a hard time explaining this. And one of the things that Walt and I over at the Metaphysical Connection have explained is that there's this thing called loche. And it's a funky word. It's a creepy kind of word. But the thing is that it's sort of like this. It's a psychic vibration that you are, or a psychic scent that you leave with you. And there are these beings, they're ghosts, archons, whatever they are, that feed off of this. And the thing is, they feed off especially the negative emotions because they are the most powerful emotions out there. And the thing is that like if they have somebody who exudes all of these negative emotions, they will actually taunt these people to leave these negative, more and more negative emotions. And that's, you want to call those demons? They're demons. Okay, they're demons. If you want to call them fairies or the fae, whatever. Okay, there, because nobody can really explain what it is. But this is a real phenomenon. Whereas it's like if you go and you go, like, a show of hands, who's gone house hunting or apartment hunting? You can just tell something happened there. And sometimes, like, if you say...
Funny, yes. Speaking about houses, I actually live in a house that's been around since 1600s. And it's nothing but joyful. It's old, it's creaky, but boy, you can really see there has been a lot of joy in this house. This house has not been burned down to the ground like the rest of the town by Napoleon when it came by and just stood up, but there's nothing bad about it.
And that's phenomenal, and you can tell. And
Yes.
there was this one place, there was this one apartment when I was a kid, around 5 years old, that a teenage boy or teenage young man returned back from Vietnam, and he was shunned by everybody because that's just the way it was back then with that unpopular war, and he killed himself. And the thing is that after he killed himself, and no matter how well that they could repaint the walls, they can refinish the floors, they can do whatever, people knew something happened in that apartment. And if you've ever been house hunting and you just feel this weird thing and you'll look over at the realtor and say, hey, what happened here? Oh, funny you should mention this. 5 years ago, there was a quadruple homicide and a suicide. Some guy claimed that he was like something.
So you got it really cheap by then.
Listen, when you go into a lot of these abandoned locations, whether it's in New England or anywhere in Europe, Asia, wherever, you can just tell because people leave psychic vibrations.
Yes,
It's almost like an emotional radiation.
Speaking of it, I have a few questions. Do you think science doesn't really yet have the right tools to measure the things that we feel? Because I think that might be a problem.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
You can answer that. I got to take a whack at it.
Okay. I can easily say that while technology is very advanced, I don't think we're quite to the level where we can reliably, to 100%, or even, let's be even fair, to about 80%, say that phenomenon or anomalies that happen all over the world in certain areas are easily explainable away by modern science. And there's a reason for that. And it's very complicated, and I'm not going to go fully into it because otherwise we would be here for another 3 hours. But I believe that there's more to paranormal phenomenon than just what we know. I believe there is some form of quantum element to it. I'm not entirely certain how involved quantumly it is, but I do believe that there is a decent quantum element involved. I will say that from the emotional radiation standpoint, we really don't have anything that's fine-tuned enough. Because, I mean, you can have someone who calls himself a medium or a psychic go into a building and claim that they can feel the aura. But for people who aren't trained in those arts, how do you quantify that information to them? Oh, you're looking a lovely shade of blue today. You can't. It's not that simple because they can't perceive it. Not unless you take the time to train them, and that can take years. Because and I know because Eric also just said that he is a investigator too, he knows what I'm talking about. There's a piece of equipment called an EMF detector. And it basically measures ambient electromagnetic frequencies in the air. And the problem is because this is a very fine piece of equipment, it can very easily be messed with by even the smallest of things. If you take a small refrigerator magnet, it'll set it off. So it's very difficult with modern technology right now to be able to accurately say one way or another if something is 100% paranormal. Because I've been in places that appear to be paranormal. The owners have verbatim said to me on multiple occasions, hey, we've encountered such and such and such and such. I go in there and nothing happens. I don't even register blips on any of my devices. I spend 5 hours that night recording audio and video evidence and spend the next 3 days going over it all with a fine-tooth comb and find nothing. But as I'm doing that, I'm getting reports that say that, yeah, activity is still continuing. So at some point, you got to ask yourself, how intelligent is it? Does it know, hey, these people are looking for this, or these people are trying to search for this, and they decided to play hide and seek?
Well,
I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion that ghosts are professional hide and seekers, and they just enjoy messing with all of us.
Yep.
I'm kind of two things I want to interject here. On the quantum thing, I had Eddie Clark on my last episode. She's one of the voice actresses and also the writer on the show Sage and Savant, a very popular steampunk audio drama. And she's been investigating a lot on mind transference and stuff like that. And there seems to be this theory that our thoughts are, like we have our brain, where all the chemical processes takes place and all the neurons are fired off. However, that our thoughts are exist on a quantum level, and the brain is just a kind of like a container. It doesn't. If you know what I'm trying to say, kind of like what the atmosphere is to air, or brain is to these the thoughts that are in this quantum state, basically going on. So that's one thing that's theorized right now, and the other thing I wanted to mention is, I'm sure you have heard of places like Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Yeah, the German death camps, not concentration camps, they were death camps, and there are no animals near that place. Birds and other animals avoid it like the plague. Now, one explanation I heard about that. I actually visited another place like that. It's called the Dome, which is in Belgium, which was a underground V2 factory where they launched these Vergeldings weapons from. It was never really finished, but it was also a place where they had a lot of Jewish prisoners working on those rockets. And worked them to death, and it's also said there are no birds near that vicinity either. Anyway, one of the theories is that those places, that it is the chemicals from, all the fear, all the stress that these prisoners secreted.
Yep.
It's actually seeped into the ground and the surrounding area, and animals smell that, and they don't want to go near it anymore. But for all we know, it could be quantum theory.
Well, it's already been an established scientific fact that when human beings are under massive amounts of stress, and particularly stress based around fear, as we produce adrenaline in the body, it changes the pH of our sweat.
Right.
And as we perspire it, it goes into the air as well as obviously into the ground. So it's possible that because of the amount of chemicals both used in the manufacturing of said devices and all the adrenaline enhanced sweat that may be still in the ground, that it's highly possible that those two factors, on top of a myriad of others, is the reason why wildlife seems to avoid those places.
Right. So
I think that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. One of the things I wanted to just get back into about whether or not science can explain all of this or try to explain this. Everything that you need to really sort of look at as far as, whether or not this is real or not. It doesn't matter if you think it's real or not. The CIA and the United States federal government thought it was real enough for this Project MK Ultra, where they've spent literally millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars looking into ways to literally weaponize the paranormal. And if that doesn't sort of give you the creeps, I don't know what will. The idea that there are people
viewing, astral projection, telepathy, telekinesis, body possession via remote people, like having agents send out their astral forms and control people across continents.
Isn't it enough for you to understand that there are people in the federal government who believed in all of this to know that there must be something to it? It's either that or there are just people in the federal government here in the United States who are insane. And you know what? Both could be true. Both literally could be true.
They both are true.
They are true. They have to be true. And various things that I have read recently in the research for the upcoming show that we're doing is the Twining memo, which goes hand in hand with a Brookings Institute memo that said, yes, there are aspects of the paranormal that are out there, and we are exploiting them within the federal government. And the thing is that they're doing, they're talking out of both corners of their mouth. It's a information disinformation organization, whereas they're trying to slowly introduce these strange paranormal things that are going on within the federal government, slowly marching towards full disclosure, and they're using Hollywood at their disposal to sort of say these things are possible, as it were. And the more that you read this stuff, the more that you realize that this is stranger than fiction. I mean, if you can realize this, like they tapped some guy. I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy's name, L. Ron Hubbard. I'm being facetious. And L. Ron Hubbard, what people don't realize is that L. Ron Hubbard was a part of a secret organization during World War II, where they had all these science fiction authors like Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein. Let's just come up with strange ideas that we could, impose. Take these ideas and sort of like make them into reality here, just in an effort to win the war. And this guy went a little fruity. This guy went a little crazy and came up with this idea for his own religion. And the thing is that the government is using things like the media to sort of like introduce these little notions, these ideas. Like, fine example is that there are people out there who are convinced that Steven Spielberg was tapped on the shoulders and said, "Hey, listen, you need to make this movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind to introduce the idea that we're in regular contact with these people." And it was just like, and if you go too far down this rabbit hole, then you're going to believe that everything from Stargate to Star Trek to Twilight Zone is real. But some of it's real and some of it's not. And the idea that the government is using Hollywood as a propaganda machine really should cause everybody a minute to take a moment and just say, well, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, well, I mean, movies have been a great way of promoting propaganda. I mean, Hitler was a great fan of the movies, and he loved to use film as a medium to promote his own ideas. Also, resulting in one of the movies, I think it was called The Triumph of the Will, which was in its own time it was a movie ahead of its time, the way it was shot and filmed and done, and it's a cinematic masterpiece. It's still used by film critics today. Film students, I meant. So yeah. So who knows, maybe, for all we know, Hollywood is trying to prepare us for alien overlords,
Not just alien overlords, but the notion that the universe is far stranger than we could ever possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, we really don't need Hollywood necessarily to tell us that. I mean, just look at science right now. There's an organism that is so tough, so genetically sound, and it's by evolution able to withstand all this stuff, but it's super tiny.
And oh, you mean the water panda?
Yeah.
Water pandas. I didn't know the English name for it, but yeah, water pandas. But it can survive in space. We're crying out.
I mean, that's weird. Why is such a small little critter that you need advanced microscopes to see? How is it able to survive in the vacuum of space when nothing else can?
Well, maybe
that to me is weird.
Maybe the creationists are wrong. The universe is not made for us, but it's made for these water pandas.
All hail our water panda overlord.
Yeah. That one day the aliens will come down and they'll ask a water panda about why they tried to contact them,
Oh. And Eric, going back on kind of what you said, I do agree with you. I do think there is possibly some group or whatever, whether they're funded by the government or not, that I think is in some way, shape, or form loosely causing the media to try and introduce new ideas into the public to try and get people used to certain ideals and stuff like that. But for people who, I hate to use this word because it implies that there's negativity behind it, because it has been negatively associated with certain people, and I'm not going to go into names. I know people already know who I'm talking about. When it comes to conspiracy theories or people who die hard believe that aliens exist and have already existed or have already visited our planet and stuff like that, I go back to my personal philosophy. And to kind of explain my personal philosophy, I kind of have to go into a little bit of geography. Before I lived here in Virginia, I lived in Missouri. And Missouri has a motto by the name of, it's called the Show Me State.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that all the time when I'm talking to people about the paranormal. I will neither believe nor disbelieve you until you show me your evidence. Because anyone nowadays can go online, take a bit of footage that they took of just a normal cloudy sky and put it through a few programs to make it look like there might be something. Because like last year, there was a huge thing that happened in, all over social media where there was an apparent video where it was taken in Shanghai and there appeared to be a city above the clouds.
Yeah.
But then when someone went and dissected it, they actually looked at the code for the video and found that the information that represented the supposed floating city was actually from a different video of all things from a video game.
Yeah.
So when you deal with the paranormal, you have to be prepared to take literally everything with a grain of salt. Otherwise, you will get a fish hook in your mouth and pulled out of the water faster than you can say John Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Yeah.
Because everyone is out to get people upon their own ideals. I mean, it's narcissism. Everyone has a little bit of narcissism because everyone wants them to believe themselves. Like, I would love for you guys to believe everything I say. I'm not foolish enough to know that everything I'm going to be saying today and the rest of this podcast will be taken immediately at face value, but I'm happy that it's not. I want people, that's my main pet peeve when it comes to the paranormal. And I will explain the two stories behind my reasoning behind this once I say this point. I cannot stand yes men. I cannot stand people who come up to you, you tell them something, they go yes, and then they're done. They don't question it. They don't ask questions. They don't want to know more. They don't want to know, well, why is this like that? They just take what they're given at face value and then carry on. Because people need to question. That's how we learn.
Yes.
That's how we adapt.
If I also may ask something, because we were lauding propaganda and how the media is controlled, but let's say we go a little bit back in time, where the times when paranormal was also done by witches, paganisms, or anything else. How does also interpreted in stories and of how we should watch out for? Because we're in this fast age, but a lot of these fiction are paranormal activities do also come from a lot of history, right?
Mm-hmm.
From back in the day. Like, how do you deal with it? I actually lost the question. I lost it.
Oh dear.
Well,
Here's a question that I would like to ask everybody, not just all of you who are listening. I mean, not all of you who are listening and people who are participating in this conversation. Is this thing real? The Brookings Report document created proposed studies on the implications of peaceful space activities for human affairs. That's a real document. It's an actual real document created by the Brookings Report under the Eisenhower administration what's going to happen if NASA keeps going forward and we start exploring strange new worlds within our own solar system and beyond, and we find artifacts that defy explanation. And the thing is that does that document actually exist? Of course it exists. You can find copies of it. Know where to look. The Twinings memo, which is there's a great book out there, and it was published just a few short weeks ago, and I'm almost done with it. It's called The Day After Roswell. The title is a little it's a misnomer, but it's how Roswell changed the government the day after the Roswell incident. And the thing is that there's a Twinings memo. The Twinings memo was written by a general working at the Pentagon, General Twinings, and he had said this is how we have to deal with the notion of we are being not invaded, but observed by entities and beings beyond our own or whatever it is that you want to call it. And this is something that's actually real. And there are these documents that are slowly being released into the public through the Freedom of Information Act. And the thing is that it's like the government has knowledge of things that they denied earlier on. There are things out there like Roswell. Something happened in Roswell. Whether or not you want to believe that it was was brought over from Europe during Operation Paperclip, a Nazi flying wing, or whether or not you want to believe something happened. And the federal government made very, very sure to make sure that the people who lived in the area and saw what was there kept their mouths shut. And they used the strong arm of the government to say, if you don't keep your mouth shut, we will kill you and we will kill your family with extreme prejudice. That actually happened. There's evidence that aspect actually happened. The government threatened people into keeping quiet for 60, 70 years. That's an actual thing that you can look at and say that actually happened. And you see all these documents out there that says the government is trying to use the paranormal, weaponize psychic abilities. That's an actual real thing that happened. The thing that drives me crazy is that all these people out there, like your crazy Uncle George, who honestly believes that next to God, he is the most powerful, supreme being in the universe. There's nothing more important or special in the universe other than your Uncle George, who insists that these things are not true when the evidence is right there in front of you. And the thing is that you have to do your reading. Investigator, you have to do your reading. There is a couple of essential books that you need to read. You also have to pull out the Bible and look at it and what does it say about the paranormal. I'm not saying you have to be a Bible thumping a Baptist and talking about the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, but you have to read your documents, look into the Quran, look at all these other holy documents and what do they say about these things, and look at it through what is this person trying to say with the vocabulary that they had at the time and their understanding of the universe. Look at the book of Ezekiel. What is Ezekiel talking about? These flying discs within.
I may interject, Eric. What he's saying is absolutely correct, but you need to do your reading. Because contrary to what popular fiction, which I kind of feel bad because we got way off topic of popular fiction, but anyway, what popular fiction and reality TV aren't telling you is that paranormal, in the term of paranormal science, which that in itself is kind of an oxymoron, paranormal is still considered to be a pseudoscience. Mm-hmm. But in the realm of paranormal is an umbrella term. It covers everything from spirits and non-corporeal entities to ancient mechanisms and legends, stuff like Avalon or Camelot or Atlantis or Shangri-La or Shambhala. Those kinds of places. It covers mythology and folklore. It covers cryptids or animals that have not easily been explained away by science, such as Sasquatch here in the United States, the Yeti over in Tibet. Trying to think of the name for
Nessie?
no, the Filipino version of Bigfoot.
Yet,
I can't remember its name, but like Nessie, La Chupacabra from Central America. It covers aliens, as much as I loathe to admit it. It covers the occult. It covers a wide variety of things, but the media focuses on ghosts because ghosts are easy to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Ghosts are the easiest portion, other than aliens, to sell to the public when it comes to the paranormal.
Right.
Because think about it. Is it easier to make a really wrinkly alien animatronic, or is it really easy to make a very good-looking Sasquatch costume?
That's a good question. That really is, and I tend to believe that one of the best and worst things that could happen for all of us who are in the realm of the paranormal is that you can so easily get your hands on some computer programs that will help you do 3D animation and make it look really sort of cinematically photorealistic.
That's why when I collect video evidence, even though I know it'll piss people off, I don't edit it. I leave it completely unedited. Yes, it may take you a few hours to go completely through any videos that I send you, but it is not edited in any way, shape, or form. Because by editing it, you remove transparency.
True.
people always don't have really
instill
time
doubt.
for it anymore.
You instill doubt as soon as you start editing stuff. Like, just okay. Partly this is because I can't stand attempting to edit audio through Audacity, but I don't edit audio either because it's a hassle. Like, I can't tell you how many times to get a 5-second clip I had to restart my entire project. It was agonizing. A lot of cursing was involved, and I more than likely punched something that I shouldn't have punched.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. With the Ghost Hunters, with the Ghost Adventures crew, with all these other, like, Paranormal Lockdown, Ghost Brothers, and all these other TV shows that are popping up like frickin' rabbits in heat. The real paranormal investigators, the people who have boots on the ground, that every day dedicate their time to researching, to innovating how we collect data and evidence. Those are the people that need to know that we need to be even more transparent than the ghosts we go after.
Yeah.
Because the instant there is even the slightest amount of us doing something, like we omit a detail or we embellish slightly embellish one, or we edit something that really didn't need it, we lose that transparency and our evidence goes and becomes subject to doubt. Because, and I'll use them as an example, and I'm sure Eric has heard of them because he lives in the New England area. There's a couple called the Warrens.
Yes.
And their names are Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed passed away a few years ago. Lorraine is the only one that's still alive. But they have become famous because of their work in the paranormal field, because Ed is to this date, from what I understand, was the only non-Catholic ordained demonologist. He was the only one that the Catholic Church has let perform the rites of exorcism without being a priest.
Okay.
And so they're fairly respected in the paranormal world, except there's a few of us, like myself, and there's a few other people I know here that absolutely do not trust a single thing that comes out of their mouth. And that's because the instant, even if it's just a few people. The instant someone says something in contrary to what they are saying, that puts doubt. Whether you mean for it to be there or not, doubt comes in. So they have this very famous case. It was the case that was used to create the movie The Conjuring. They actually had someone come in to help write their case report for a book. And it is recorded on both audio and written down that Ed Warren told the author, yeah, just make some stuff up to make it look good.
Yeah. Yep.
And why would you need that if you know for a fact that paranormal stuff happened? Why would you need to embellish stuff? Why would you need to make stuff up?
So
It doesn't make sense.
As he was getting paid. Because he was getting paid for his story.
All right.
And for me-
I want to leave it at this for tonight, gentlemen, because we're running almost nearly 1.5 hours. So, is there? Do you have some closing statements for tonight?
Eric, I feel like I've kind of taken over the majority of this. If you want, you can add your closing statement first.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to become a paranormal investigator, you got to learn to do your research. And a lot of people seem to think that doing research is like it's boring stuff. And the thing is like if you're doing your research for your paranormal investigations and it's boring, you're doing it wrong. You have to know everything that you possibly can about whatever it is that you're looking into. That means that you need to go to the library and you need to research a location. And did anything weird happen at the location? But what could have occurred there? And you learn how to read a topographical map. Learn how to actually like do the work, do the kind of like how to do in high school and college and doing your research and go into everything not with an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out.
Right.
Be open-minded,
Right.
minded and be skeptical. Don't take everybody
Be a colander.
exactly. And the thing is that don't be stupid about it. And also use the buddy system. Don't go anywhere without a buddy. And I can't say anything more than that.
All right. Bart, you want to add anything to that?
not anything to the most. Not really, because paranormal is not really my activity. I've been trained into slowly shielding myself from it, but that's just about it. Train your senses too. Train your energy. That's what I could say.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it was a rather unusual episode for the Anachronistic Society, but I like to be surprised, so I'm not complaining. As for the floating city story, there is this channel called Captain Disillusion. He's a great YouTuber and skeptic, has worked with the greats like,
James Randi.
James Randi, that's the name I was looking for. He worked with him as well in the past. And he also did he debunked the video with the floating city above Shanghai. Go watch his channel. He does really great work on how the video editing works and how they do a lot of the visual tricks they perform in such videos. And that's Captain Disillusion. And everyone else, of course, go check out Eric's podcast, the Vidara Chronicles, or the Metaphysical Connection, if you want to learn more about this stuff. Daimos, do you have a website or anything?
Not presently. I am working on some stuff, but it's not ready at this current point in time, so...
Alright, well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, keep watching Radio Retro Future, and hopefully till the next Anachronistic Society, and, as always, make it your way. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.
5, 6, 7, 8. Hit it!